Welcome to another Maamar we learned today in the Misgaris of Project Melukat. Is Maamar learned in the Schusel Nishmas, our beloved Shiur, וגנר. The Maamar we learned today is the Maamar Balayla, ההוא נולד Shnas HaMelech, Tavshin Memdal, who said on Purim, Tavshin Memdalid. It was Muga in Tavshin Memches and edited in Melukat Beis, the sefer that we're learning now in the project. Then in Kod of the Maamar, Merdik Shwaka Maamar, it brings a Maril which says that the Toikev Shalnes, the greatest emphasis, the greatest part of the miracle, is the fact that King Achashverosh couldn't fall asleep. And the obvious question is, how is that possible? And we explain how, spiritually speaking, King Achashverosh represents the Eibishter, and when during Golus, the Eibishter technically should be sleeping, nevertheless the Eibishter wakes up, and then the Mile of Yidden, the greatest Mile of Yidden that exists Be'etzem Behelim in the time of Golus, is now revealed, and it's the greatest, highest Indian, even greater than could be in the Zman Abayis. About Purim. Let us get right in. So we begin with the Diva Maschal Pasuk in the Megillah, the beginning of Perek Vav. Balayla, who Nadav Shas HaMelech, was that night the king's sleep drifted away. Maybe Chok Mochad Maamar the Maschal Zadafidika brings in the Maamar saying Diva Maschal. This is the Maril. The Maril brings in the Menhagim. Balayla, who tzich like Bias Koil B'Kriyasel V'Shazau Ikra Nes. When a Balkir reads Balayla, who in the Megillah, needs to elevate his voice because this is the primary miracle. It's the greatest miracle. Why? The Balayla who Atchol Toik Shalnes, and that ever brings here another nusach from the Gemara where it says it's Atcholas Toik Shalnes. This is the beginning of the strength, and this is actually one day where you literally, to be yet to the mitzvah, only need to hear Megillah from Balayla who. And the question Aqibah has in the Maamar seemingly there's a lot of other points in the Megillah where I would choose to say this is where the miracle begins. For example, the fact that Esther comes to plead to the king, is already the second feast, or even the preparations, when Esther tells Mordechai to gather all the Jewish people and fast in preparation for Esther to go beseech from the king to rescue the Jewish people. Seemingly those seem like more pivotal points in the story. Seemingly, if you really think about it, the story of Balayla Hu Nadav Shas HaMelech, where the king couldn't fall asleep, so he brought the Sefer Zechrenis, it ended up resulting in, obviously, Mordechai HaTzadik receiving tremendous honor, but ultimately it wasn't really necessary for the story of Purim. If you think about it, Mamela, it's very strange to say that is Toikvoy, or that is the Ikra Nes. And here we say the primary and the strength of the miracle is the fact that the king's sleep drifted from him. And the answer the Vidya brings, so maybe the Isa B'Yalkut is born in the Medrash, when we say the king's sleep drifted away, we're actually referring to the king of the world. The obvious question is, obviously Hashem doesn't sleep, so what does it mean his sleep drifted away? And the answer is, when Jewish people sin, Eibishter makes as if he's sleeping. And when Jewish people are doing Hashem's will, that's when the Eibishter is wide awake. So the bottom line is, there is different matzavim in the Eibishter. When we're in the right situation, Jewish people are awake and alert and doing what the Eibishter wants. That is when the Eibishter is awake and alert as well, taking care of us. When we fall asleep, so to speak, when we start falling back in our commitment to Torah mitzvahs, the Eibishter as well is, so to speak, sleeping. He turns a blind eye, so to speak, to the Jewish people. Now what they're going to explain, we know the Jewish people, we are could be compared to the Adam Ha'eli and the Eibishter. We know everything the way it is, the Lamaila and Shemayim could be compared. We could find ourselves within the bigger picture. In other words, David HaMelech says, from a person, you could understand the Sphere Salyanis. Atem Krim Adam. Because the same way the image is in Shemayim, La'ela, up on high, is the same way it reflects itself down here. Like the pasuk says, the same way a person's reflection of his face can be reflected in the water, so too a person's heart is reflected in another person's heart. And the simple meaning is the way a person can connect to another person emotionally. But here he's tagging it Adam, and Adam refers to Adam de Lamata and Adam de La'ela, Adam de Lamaila, and we are a reflection one of another. Mela, when you look at a person, you study the human, you can also understand a lot of things about the Eibishter. When Jewish people are in a situation of sleep, of slumber, the things that would technically make them compared to the Eibishter, the ideas of Torah mitzvahs, are in a matzav of shina as well. They're sleeping, they're not active. So that causes a reflection on high that the Eibishter in kind responds as well with the idea of sleeping. The Eibishter is not, so to speak, very actively present and alert in the matzah of the Jewish people. Like the pasuk says, "Ani yeshenu, I am sleeping, the libi air." And the Medrash says, "Visa b'zoyar." So the Zoyar comment on that big alusa in Golus. That's when the pasuk refers to the Eibishter sleeping. It all starts with the fact that Jewish people are sleeping. Our commitment weakens itself to the Eibishter. Nasa dezen, that causes a matzav of sleeping by the Eibishter as well. Now to understand, this is really going to be the kud of the whole answer. Here in this, from here till the end of Beis Aleph, then obviously throughout the Maamar we're going to explain it much more at length, but here the Rebbe is going to answer the whole question. Therefore, the fact that the Melech, the king, which we explained is referring to the Eibusher, his king, his sleep, drifted away, his toik v'shalnes, this is the strength. This is the primary celebration of Purim. Why? In the typical order of things, the time of Golus is a time when the Jewish people are not active, the Eibusher sleep. So right now is the Eibusher's time to sleep. And nevertheless, in a time of night, of Golus, the Eibusher sleep should drift away, the Eibusher, so to speak, be awakened. That is obviously a tremendous miracle. That's therefore we use the word nadda. Nadda literally means to wander away, where, in other words, the sleep was supposed to be in a certain location and it wandered away. If you think about just the regular story, so the king couldn't fall asleep. But why are we saying nadda, meaning he should have been sleeping and he couldn't? This term, Shashim Nadam HaMelech, that it drifted away, that it wandered away, it means it's appropriate. It would have been necessary. It would have been a time for the king to be sleeping. So similar to what we say about a person who wanders away from his natural location. Because the time of sleep is a time of Golus. The Eibusher should naturally be sleeping. It was a miracle, and that's the Toik V'Shalnes, the greatest miracle of Purim, that even in a time of Golus and a time of sleep, the Eibusher's sleep was removed, it was taken away. Now in Beis, we're going to continue to talk about the mushal of sleeping and how it connects to Golus in a much bigger and in a much more detailed way. So let's get into this. If you want to understand what does it mean the Eibusher sleeps, understand it from realistic sleeping, literally the way we sleep down here. The quoting the pasuk of David Melech that you can learn, see a lakus from our own bodies. The difference between a person who's awake, a person who's alert, and a person who's sleeping, obviously there's no difference in the actual formation of the body. The person is still here 100%. You're complete in your sleep as well. All of your limbs, all of your sinews, also the life within them. So first of all, your body is complete with all of its limbs. Your soul is complete with all of its faculties, all its abilities. They're even active. Like we see literally in dreams, sheyesh behem hapa'ula, all the different attributes, all the different factors of the person play a role in a person's dreams. The Rebbe says you have seichel, you have midas, you have intellect, you have emotion. Everything happens in a dream. Even the Rebbe says ratzon and tainug, which is something that Rebbe adds here on the Maamar. You have will, you have pleasure. Everything happens in a dream. To the extent that when a person merits a seichel, you can literally achieve true seichel, true intellect. It can happen when a person sleeps. So too when it comes to pleasure and will, that as well you could obtain these high levels, so to speak, when a person's sleeping. All your faculties are playing a role, they're all active. Avol, nevertheless, even if you're not reaching true seichel, true midos, true rots, and true tainug, nevertheless, we see clearly and literally, everything is active, everything is alive, at least realistically speaking, in other words, regarding things that exist within his world, like we say, dreams are the things that you thought about during the day. The Rebbe throws in the parentheses here, things that cannot exist, like for example, the fact that an elephant would stick himself through the hole of a needle. You can't even dream about something like that because it doesn't exist in your world. But regarding things that exist within your world, everything exists within a dream. So what then is the difference between a person's awake and a person's sleeping? You have all of your physical limbs, you have all of your spiritual faculties. So what's the difference? So the difference is as follows. When a person is awake and alert, everything is organized. Therefore, everything is organized, everything has its own place, and Mikolshkin, that Rebbe says how much more so, you're never going to find two opposite things combining, connecting, and not even in one as extension of the other. Obviously, there's going to be normal order within the faculties, within all your different capabilities. When everything is in an organized fashion, so then you also have a hierarchy. You see the maila, the advantage of one over the other, and you see which one is greater, which one is primary, which one's necessary, which one's less. On the other hand, when a person's sleeping, all of a sudden, you could dream about two completely opposite faculties and how they combine. The greatest, highest faculty and the lowest ability a person has are able to come together in a dream to the extent of many, many different emotions and intellects. Everything could be as a mush, in a very unorganized manner. And especially that you can't recognize and realize what's greater, what's lower. It's all one big challenge. And the example for this can be understood in the Eibish's Chalemus as well in the time of Golus. What do we mean? What does it mean the Eibish is sleeping? You don't see the hierarchy. You don't see the advantage, the greatness of higher things versus lower things. And that's fits perfectly with the concept of Golus, the concept of exile. Okay, now it's not a Golus in Shoshana like we already explained. Golus is the idea of sleeping. Why can you see beside Golus? What causes Golus? Because we don't see the advantage of a Jew. When Jewish people in Manabayis and Yisrael and Shlomo Melech is running the situation and all the Goyim are subjugated to the Jewish people and they're all paying taxes, there you have a matziv where you see very clearly the Jewish people are the chosen people and everyone else is here to serve them. When you're in Golus, you don't see that the Jewish people, on the contrary, they're being enslaved by the nations. We know Jewish people are children of the Eibush. You are children to Hashem. And even if they're not necessarily on the standard, they're not behaving like children, but they're at least Eibush's servants. Like we tell the Eibush in Shoshana, if you're not going to treat us like children, at least like servants. And we know even a servant of a king has the status of a king. This is not just like with a chaf, but literally a servant of a king has the status, has the importance of a king. In the normal, simple, orderly fashion is that children have to be seated by the father's table. As well as servants should, their natural habitat is that they are lying on they're relying and dependent on the table, the support of their master. The fact that we have exile, the fact that we're not there now, that is the concept of sleep. That is where the confusion, where you don't see an order, you don't see the greater and the lower, you don't see the higher. You don't necessarily recognize and realize the advantage of the Jewish people, the greatness of the Jewish people, and therefore eventually Golus comes. So the Rebbe begins by saying it starts with us sleeping. We are not committed, we're not alert in the realm of Torah mitzvahs, and that causes the Eibush to sleep. And once the Eibush is sleeping, it becomes chaos, it becomes a mish. The Jewish people are not recognized as the greatest anymore, and on the contrary, they're able to be seen as lower than the rest of the nation. So that is the mushal of sleeping, the mushal of a dream, and how it ties into the bigger picture of Golus. Now in this Gimel, the Rebbe is going to explain and take it to the next step. What indeed is happening when a person sleeps? What happens to all the koiches? Why are they all confused? Why is there no orderly fashion? The answer is, the reason why. When a person is sleeping, you're not able to see the order of koiches. You're not able to see a recognized function, where every one of them is doing its part. And it's similar to how all the different faculties, all the different abilities are still in their potential, still in the essence of the soul. What do we mean? The way a person develops, it starts from an essence, and eventually it all develops, like he's going to explain in the next paragraph a lot more elaborately. But the bottom line is, it all started from the essence, and when you go sleep, all the koiches go back to their source. Balayla, when they're in the source, there is no difference between one and the other. Everything becomes one. They go back to their source, they go back to the essence of the soul. That's understood also. We could apply that to the Nimshal in the fact that in the time of Golus, there's Shina, there's sleep. There is a certain lack of presence, of awareness of what really is going on. The order of things, ultimately it's only the Giluim. The revealed manifestation of the Eibishter's koiches, that is what is drawn back, so to speak, to its source. Ultimately all becoming one and nichlal in the Eibishter's essence. What does it mean that the Eibishter isn't present? It means the Eibishter went up higher. Went back to its natural place, which is a room within a room, a chamber in a chamber. What do we mean? What does this ultimately teach us? A very, very interesting thing. It's not pshat that there's actually no difference between the koiches. Only down here the way it appears is that there's no difference between one koyach and another koyach. But therefore down here you don't see the mile of one of the other, and that ultimately is what creates Golus. But in the context of the actual light, the actual koiches, on the contrary, that's when they go back to their source. When they're in their source, they're obviously in the source of where they were come from. They're in their most perfect potential in the greatest way possible. Which is similar and the same as the dogma, the analogy that we brought from a literal person sleeping. The body is dead. The body doesn't see any order. The nefesh is not there anymore. But if you can ask the nefesh itself, how is he feeling? During the time of sleep, that is when the nefesh goes back to its source and draws life from there. Meaning, down here in the world, it seems like chaos, it seems like there's no order, but ultimately, the koiches are much better off because they're in their source, and in their source, they're all equal, but they're all much stronger, they're part of an essence. And the Rebbe is going to tie that now into, what does that mean? As Dafka in the time of Golus, you see the mile of Yidden in a much stronger way. Yeah. In the Nikol Seder Shashas Brugas Sadagas Kechas HaNefesh, Rebbe is going to tell us, just like we just explained in the Moshel of the Kechas HaNefesh, all the different factors of the person become one with the essence. When a person is sleeping, so too the entire Seder Shashas, the whole order of things, the way the Eibishter uses different tools, different Kechas to create a world, is all similar to the Kechas HaNefesh of the person. Just like when it came to the development of a human, it all started from one point, one Nekuda, and eventually from that one point, everything develops, everything articulates into separate organs, separate limbs, and then that's when they're able to be hischalkus, differentiation, division, and unique chayis in every one of them. The Rebbe says not just is there these two general categories where you have the essence and then you have how they all develop, but within development there are many layers, many levels of how developed is it and how much do we see within them their unity and their oneness and how they're in their original form. Where do we see this? You have the regular way, then you have the way it's hidden when you're sleeping. So that's a regular human being who has many different functions. There's the way you're awake, and then there's the way you're sleeping. To the extent that they could be even deeper than sleeping. If you faint, Rahman the Rebbe says the same thing is in Shamayim, in Lamaila, in the context of the Eibishter and all the different faculties of Hashem. You also have different levels, different layers, different ways how the Eibishter's koiches are nizgalek. Just like we know, the soul filling up the body is an analogy for the Eibishter filling up the world. Just like we understand there are different ways how much the neshama develops and becomes independent entities, independent koiches, so too there's different layers and levels in how the Eibishter's koiches become independent in the world. It all started with Erd and Seif, with an Akudah, with the Eibishter. In that place, it's higher than differentiation, higher than division. Eventually, it's a tzimtzum, and it becomes Atzilus. What happens in Atzilus? Obviously, Atzilus is a world of unity, a world of oneness. There's no Yeshus in Atzilus. Nevertheless, ultimately, there's a concept of limitation, Ebimel, this confinement. And if this confinement, every layer, every level has its own unique individuality. That is exactly 10, not 9, 10, not 11. That as well as when you're able to see the hierarchy, so to speak, the advantage of one over the other. That's all in the world of Achdus. Once it goes one layer down, it's the world of Biyas, so definitely then you're able to start seeing division. Then there's already Yeshus, and then they're even more differentiated. They're more different one from another. From this eventually develops and evolves into the literal ischalkus, the literal division that we have in our world. You have a place like the Beis Hamikdash, which is the holiest chosen place in the world, and that is the source of light to the entire world. The world itself is concealment, it's a place of darkness. What happens through the Beis Hamikdash? There's a light, there's an neshama, there's chayis, there's vitality that comes into the world, similar to how it works in the spheres, that the lower spheres receive from the higher spheres, so too in the world, the entire world receives from the Beis Hamikdash. And in a time, in Azman Abayis, when you have this hierarchy, when you have the koiches developed, when you have, like so to speak, in a human being when he's awake, Nikar Gama Ma'ila Yisrael. So automatically the Jewish people who are the chosen people are going to stand out as greater, superior people. Because we are the chosen people, we are the children. The fact that we are Hashem's servants. We are sincere servants to our master. That's all like a human being who's awake. And when he's awake, all the different faculties are developed into different limbs, different areas, different places, division. B'meila, you're able to see there's a head, there's a heart, there's feet, everything has its own place. Yidden are greater, Yidden is superior, the base of English is greater. That's all in a functional hishtalshlus and zman habayis. Zman hagolus, on the other hand, when it comes to a time of exile, all the superior things that evolved in Ishtalshus, Atzilus, Biyah, all those different aspects of Hashem are now all consumed within the Eibish's essence. They go back to their source, just like a person when he's sleeping, all of a sudden now they're able to be opposites combined. Or B'meila, Jewish people who are the greatest, who are the highest, who are superior, won't necessarily see it, and we're going to look similar and equal to the nations of the world around us. Now that we explained how in the Eibish's Keiches HaNefesh you have the same idea of a dream and sleeping and development. Now we're going to translate even deeper how we see Take in Golus. How on one hand it seems like Golus we're in the lowest state, we're in the lowest, but ultimately the Koiches and Neshama, the way they're in the Etzem, are much more Bizgalus. They're much more strong. They're in their source. B'meila, you'll see how in truth the time of Golus is a certain aspect where the Jewish people are even stronger than Zman habayis. Let's see, Amnam. Just like we explained, the Isalmus, the concealment that happens when a person sleeps is only that the Keiches HaNefesh, that the different faculties of a person are hidden back into their source. So where do we see the diminishment? Where do we see the lack? It's only in the revealed limbs, the revealed attributes, that everything's unorganized. On the other hand, when you're trying to measure the actual koichos and you find them in the nefesh, the way they're sourced, you're right, there's no hierarchy. You're right, they're all equal. Nevertheless, that's not a defect. On the contrary, they're in their absolute complete form, and when every koyach is in its absolute complete 100% potential, so obviously they're all equal because they're all essence. They're all in the greatest form possible. So too, it can be translated in the Nimshol, in the story, in the analog. You're right. In the time of sleep, the Giluim of Hashem go back to the source. The Sham, but there in the source, ask yourself a question. In the time of Golus, are Jewish people greater or are Jewish people weaker? It seems like we're weaker. It seems like we're equal to the rest of the nations. But in truth, we are nichlal in our source. The Maila of a Yid is mit a ganze Shturim. You're right. It's not going to be visual. It's not on the surface. It's beneath the surface. But in the regular system, the regular scheme of things, it's not recognizable. It develops into Golus. Now here in the next few lines, the Rebbe is going to answer our question. Answer what was the toikif of the nest that the Eibusha woke up, and what we see here, the extremes and how it all comes together. What happens when on one end it's a time of sleep, it's a time of Golus. We know that the koyach of a yid, the mile of a yid is in its greatest potential. Not here, but somewhere else, in the Eibusha's essence. What happens when in a time of sleep, the sleep wanders away, and all of a sudden, the Eibush is awake. If the Eibush is awake and alert, everything falls into place. Everything becomes now b'pnimius. Now the regular system is functioning again. The Maila of a Yid is Mizgala, but not just the Maila, the way it is in Zman habayis, when you have the regular system of Yidin and Goyim and a whole world. Now you're being Megala the Yidin's Maila the way they are in a time of Shina, which is the way they're in their essence. So it's a time of sleeping. The Yidin's Maila is in its greatest potential, in its greatest form. And that Maila is this Gala, and that is the craziness of the miracle of Purim. And the Rebbe says in our order here how maybe here, maybe a little earlier, but we know that true miracles in Lamaila are when you break the teva of Shemaim. In other words, Kriyas Yamsuf is the greatest miracle because we're breaking the Eibish's teva. When you break the Eibish's teva, that's a real miracle. Here we're breaking a system which doesn't really make sense, because really it's a system of either or. When you're sleeping, you're much stronger, but you're concealed. When you're awake, you're obviously the highest, but you're down here, ultimately it's revealed. To have this chibur, this combination of extremes, where on one hand is a time of Shina, B'meila, the Yidden and his Gala, the way they're in the Etzim, but that itself should be revealed. That is a miracle, and that is the toikif of the miracle of Purim. Now that I'm just going to go back to explain the idea of goals. Now we'll understand even better the combination of opposites that happens in goals. Like, it's not a goal, you're right. In a time of goal is typically the Jewish people's mila is even greater than time of bais. Why? All the Giluyim, all the revelations go back to their source, and in the source are obviously much greater, much stronger. Nevertheless, in a typical time of golus, not just that down here they seem equal to the nations. That some they're literally enslaved to the extent they receive their chayis through the Soria umis that they are subjugated to. Via Shleimer. That could also be explained why golus is compared to ibur. Ibur is pregnancy. Why? You find the same opposites when it comes to pregnancy. Even though the child, the Gemara teaches, is in a very high spiritual state when it comes in the time when he's pregnated. He has a candle on his head. They teach him all the when you're going to be born, you're going to forget it all. In other words, you're in a very, very spiritual state when you're in the mother's womb. Nevertheless, your head is in between your knees. You're in a matzav where you cannot see the advantage of head over your feet. In other words, you're in a matzav similar to Golus. We're in Golus Taka, it's the greatest, highest spiritual time, but you can't see anything. Everything is nichlal, everything is consumed in the essence, everything is back in its source. To the extent you might be in the greatest state possible, but there's no independency. You don't see any division. You don't see your uniqueness. Everything he's eating is dependent on the mother. Like it's explained by Rucha in Torah to the Alter Rebbe and in the Maamar of the Rebbeim afterwards. What did we basically just say? An amazing thing. The time of Golus, ultimately the Jewish people's Maila, the mazel of a Yid, the koyach of a Yid, is in a much stronger state. Elamai, down here it's concealed. We also threw in one line the answer to the question of our Maamar, where you see how in the time of another Shas HaMelech you have the greatest Maila, you have the Maila of, you have both Mailas, the Maila of Golus as well as the Maila of Manabais. You have the Maila of a Yid being Nizgale in a way of a revealed way, like it is in Manabais. Nowadays, the Rebbe is going to continue to explain this Maila of Yid in the time of Golus. It's concealed, it's hidden, but it's greater ultimately than even how it is in Manabais. Talks about the time of Galus when the Goyim came and conquered the Beis HaMikdash, stormed into the Heichal, into the royal chambers of the Beis HaMikdash, and they saw Kruvim HaMo'irim Zebazeh, they were hugging each other, the two Kruvim on the Orin, two figures. We know that there were different states, how the Orins, Kruvim, how these figures could have been. When a time when the Jewish people were in a good situation, in good terms with Hashem, so to speak, that's when they would face each other and they would hug each other. And in a time of concealment, when the Eibusher was not in a good relationship with the Jewish people, they would face back to back. Here, it's a time of Golus, not just Golus, but the Goyim literally managed to infiltrate into the Beis HaMikdash, and nevertheless, what do they see? They see the Kruvim, Moiroim, Zebazeh, they're hugging each other like the Chiba of Ish v'Isha. This is even a time of the greatest concealment, the greatest Golus, the opposite of Hashem's love. What's the explanation? Because Dafka here in Golus, in the deepest Golus, that's where the greatest, highest was, Shemal Mishtalshus. This oil was in its place, in higher than Ishtalshus, but it didn't come down into our world. And I'm just going to throw in here for the Rebbe explain to Melukat Sichos, where therefore, where did we see this relationship of Eibusher and Yid? Where did we see this chibah? Dafka in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The Kodesh HaKadoshim was the one place in this whole world where we saw Maamar Einam and Amida, which means it was Ninam Nois. We saw the Eibusher's essence. Therefore, the entire world, it might have seemed like the deepest, greatest Galus, where the Jewish people were neglected by Hashem. But in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, that's one location where we saw the shirish of it, we saw the love of Hashem to Yidden. Very interesting. The Rebbe teaches us here how the time of Golus is like pregnancy, but the moment before Golus is a time of intimacy, which causes pregnancy. Razal teaches before a person leaves for a long journey, he needs to be intimate with his wife. Ultimately, what is Golus? Golus is like a husband who leaves, like the famous story where the Jewish people came to the Navi and said, seemingly we don't have any obligation to the Eibishter because the Eibishter is like a husband who left from the Nisayam. Before the Eibishter leaves, in other words, the moments of Golus, the first moments of Golus, which seem to be the darkest moments, when everything begins, that was the moment of intimacy. That was the moment that the Eibishter was with the Jewish people in the deepest way. Therefore, the Kruvim were hugging one another. Now we can understand even in a deeper way what Golus is compared to pregnancy. And the birth is going to happen when Mashiach comes. What is the process when it comes al lamata? A person is with his wife, union with his wife. That is when the child starts to form. It doesn't happen in one day. It starts concealed in the womb of the mother, which is completely concealed. Eventually develops slowly into a situation where everything's equal. After, throughout the entire evolution of pregnancy, until we reach a time of birth when he is independent and he's ready to leave himself into the open ear of the world. Same too by the Eibishter. The moment before Golus, that was the greatest moment of love, of connection the Eibishter had with us. That brought a special into the world. That was obviously concealed. It was the first moments, the opening moments of Golus. But even the Golus Iber came into the world, but in a way of pregnancy, in a way of concealment. And throughout the next couple thousand years is a time of pregnancy. There's a development. Day to day. And ultimately, through the culmination of everything, will be a birth, and that birth will be Gula. But ultimately, the moments, as Golus begins, those are the moments of the greatest, deepest connection of Yidden to the Eibishter, and it was all seen in the Kesher Kadashim, in the place that reflected higher than Ishtalshalos, how you saw the two Kruvim were hugging one another. Very, very geschmack. Everything that Taich us now explain. So what Taka caused this? How did Taka happen that a time of Shina, the Eibishter's sleep, should drift away? Either it's a time of Shina, Mela, the Yidden are in their greatest, highest potential, but Lamaila, right? In the Eibishter's sense, in the source of everything. Or they're down here and they're in their regular revealed sense. How could you have a revelation of the essence? Seemingly, it's an oxymoron, it doesn't make sense. Then we tell us it was all a response to the Memes of the Yidden's avoid of the time. Vav. The Maamar continues to explain the reason why the Eibishter's sleep drifted away, which was, again, like we explained, the primary miracle of Purim that happened to the Mesilas Nefesh of the Jewish people throughout the entire year. What's Pshat? What is Mesilas Nefesh? Mesilas Nefesh is mitzad one nekuda, the essence of the soul, the pintal yid, which is completely higher than any developed koiches of a person. Your mind will never reach it, your heart will never develop it. It's something which is just you, it's your essence. B'chinas yichida, the yachid, the highest name the neshama has. The fact that a person is ready to die, meaning he's not ready to consult with any of his faculties, with his cheshbonis, with his calculations, or any other of his faculties. What are you basically doing? You're elevating every part of you, your hands and your feet, and even your deeper koiches, like your heart, your mind, elevating everything into their source, into the nefesh. Which is similar to the way everything gets developed, elevated in the time of sleep. Ella, but there's a big difference. In a time of sleep, the difference in time of sleep, what happens? Everything leaves, everything escapes. So what happens to the body? It stays itself. Right, the body stays is void of any of these koiches. The koiches go and become one with the nefesh in a way that it's concealed and it's hidden from the body. On the other hand, that's not the same when talking about nefesh. Right? Here it's completely different. All of a sudden, when it comes to nefesh, the essence, the pinnacle yid, the yichida, is awakened and it's revealed and it penetrates every aspect of a person's life. This affects all the different koiches of the nefesh, the way they are in their place, all the different faculties, that they themselves should recognize and should submit themselves to the Eibsh's will. Therefore, this avoid of a yid, to take the etzem pintel yid, which is by definition concealed, and reveal it, and make it live through every one of their limbs, every one of their faculties and koiches, that created. When your nekuda is meir begilui, it is revealed in a revealed sense, that causes in Shemayim the same idea. The essential light, which is completely higher than Ishtalshus. Where in that place the Jewish people are complete and in the greatest way, that place where everything elevates itself to, in a time of sleep, in a time of galus, here begilui, all of a sudden it shined in the greatest revealed sense, in the greatest revelation. Now in the next paragraph, Sam's going to tell us a little bit tiffer to understand the pratus yoser, how there are different ways of performing Mesiras Nefesh, different ways of experiencing Mesiras Nefesh, and the completion, the ultimate Mesiras Nefesh is the way we just described it, that the essence doesn't stay limited to just a nekuda, but it actually penetrates every part of the person. So let's see. We'll understand this in detail through what's known. The completion, the culmination, the climax of Mesiras Nefesh is when the Mesiras Nefesh that comes from the yichida, the essence, the pintel yid, is able to be drawn down and is able to affect also the detailed koiches. That ava of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that Mesiras Nefesh should come down into your heart and into your soul and into your might. Every different faculty, every different ability, should all be penetrated with the inspiration and the motivation of complete self-sacrifice. Which is completely higher than limitation. Mesiras Nefesh, I say, I call Yisrael. This Mesiras Nefesh was by every single yid. And when talking about Jewish people, we enumerate different types of human people. And the Rebbe says, we're not just talking about different people, we're talking within every person. Every single yid, every yid, every type of yid was completely taken through with the tenua of Mesiras Nefesh. In other words, Mesiras Nefesh in one nekuda penetrated and translated itself into every different type of koyach, every different type of aspect. Yishleimar. So this is another nekuda what the Frierdiker might be referring to when he says it to Mesiras Nefesh without the entire year. We know throughout the year we have many different seasons. We know that the reason why specifically out of all beautiful fruits we pick a esrig is because the esrig lives on the tree throughout all the different seasons, and it actually gains from every single season. Meaning, we have here a nekuda where Jewish people are Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh typically is a nekuda. When you're able to be Mesiras Nefesh throughout every season of the year, meaning the seasons actually complement your Mesiras Nefesh, and Mesiras Nefesh actually takes through every different type of form, every different type of shape. And the Rebbe throws in the parentheses, in the brackets, that Esrig is P'chinas Malchus, which is Esther. In other words, Esther is the one who causes Mesiras Nefesh, and the Esrig is the type of Malchus which is able to survive or bystand all the different seasons of the year. As we know, every single tkufa, every different season has a completely different type of avodah. To the extent every single day has its own avodah. We know every single day has its own unique mission, its own unique role. The fact that they were able to stand Mesiras Nefesh the entire year, we can say another intention here. Shana means time, change, every single day, which is completely higher than limitation, which is an amazing thing, which ties, by the way, into the whole theme of the Maamar we're talking about here. Typically, Mesiras Nefesh is a nekuda. Typically, Mesiras Nefesh is a moment. Someone puts a gun to your head and you say, I'm going to die for the Eibishter. Living with Mesiras Nefesh is a completely different type of art. It means to really take the nekuda Mesiras Nefesh and bring it down into every revealed koyach, which is similar to taking the mile of Yidden the way they are in the Eibishter's essence and revealing it. So it's specifically this type of Mesiras Nefesh, Mesiras Nefesh that didn't happen in a day or in a moment. It happened in the whole year, and every season of the year. That's the Mesiras Nefesh that inspired Nadu Dashnas HaMelech, that by the Eibusher himself as well, in a time of Shina, we should reveal the Shtorim Dike Koyach and Maila of a Yid. Therefore, like we explained, the fact that the Eibusher's sleep drifted away happened due to the Jewish people's through their Mesiras Nefesh, being revealed, penetrating all the different details of the entire Yodis and that caused. It reflected, it mirrored in Shemayim as well. This which technically is limited to being completely higher than Ishtalshitz. In Nekuda, the sleep drifted away, and it ended up being revealed. To the extent, what does the Eibusher ask? What does Achashverosh ask? To bring the Divrei Hayamim, the Chronicles, eventually could be brought down into time. It's able to the extent it's able to be translated, first of all, into the more refined or more elevated areas of our world, which is time and space. And then eventually, literally in the Chronicles of Mitzrayim, the Shushan Abir recognizes and realizes that Achashverosh deserves to be paraded around town by Haman. In other words, that the world itself, Mitzrayim, Shushan himself recognized and realized that the Jewish people were superior and they were chosen. Now that I was going to say Zayin, touching it in, just like it was in Galus Shushan, so too is in our Galus. We know wherever the Jewish people are exiled, the Eibusher is with them. Which is our Galus, the Eibusher is with us as well. Through the Jewish people standing with Mesiras Nefesh, which the subtle Tnuah Mesiras Nefesh, the first opening statement of Shulchan Aruch, which is that Kashim Tnuah Mesiras Nefesh, Rebbe says, which is connected to Mesiras Nefesh, is the fact that a person is not nispol, not affected negatively by those who laugh, those who scoff. To the extent, it's not a moment, it's not something that inspires you in the moment, but it actually translates into practical action every single day and every part of the day. So like we said, it's the opening statement of the whole Shulchan Aruch. Therefore, what does it end up bringing you to? Learning Torah. It doesn't stay as an akudah, but it actually translates itself practically into doing mitzvahs and learning Torah. And it's the opening of the whole Shulchan Aruch, because every halacha in Shulchan Aruch that a person does, he needs to do with that tenuah of Mesiras Nefesh, of not being mispol. To the extent, it's not just that I'm adding nice things in my avodah, but every Esafa is completely unlimited. Why? Because it comes from Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh is something by definition is unlimited. To the extent I can literally see, it's recognizable within your avodah that this is done with a drive of Mesiras Nefesh, of self-sacrifice. And if you have Mesiras Nefesh, obviously you have love and you have fear and everything else comes with it. When a person learns, practically you have to remember the Eibusher from Welt. When you're doing a mitzvah, you're not just doing it because of routine, you're doing it because it's what the Eibusher wants. The Eibusher sanctified it with this mitzvah, gave us this mitzvah. Like it's explained by Baruch at length in the middle of Maamar, a mitzvah needs to have a general kavanah. And by the way, this is the same nekudah here, where there's the general nekudah of every mitzvah, and that needs to be drawn into the details of every single mitzvah. You have to take the essence of the soul and translate it and bring it down, channel and harness its energy to have a practical outcome in every aspect, every person's mitzvahs and avodah. And through a yid in today's galus, doing the avodah Mesiras Nefesh, and especially when the Mesiras Nefesh is able to translate into the details of their mitzvahs. That causes the Eibusher sleep even in today's galus to drift away. The koyach of a yid, the mile of a yid, the higher than ishtalshus is drawn down into ishtalshus into time, the source of time, and eventually into time itself. To the extent that it's read in front of the king. Similar to what we said earlier, that it's written in the Chronicles of Shushan. Here it's going to be read in front of the king, the literal king of the time. That we are still subjugated to this king. We are still enslaved to this king. Nevertheless, this king will recognize and hear the Mati Kasuv, right, that the Eibusher is going to read this Megillah to the Achashverosh. These chronicles, this Gila Lakus from higher than Ishtalshus. Even when we're still in Galus. And in Galus, we have to obey the rules of the government. And ultimately, Mordechai is only second in command. Nevertheless, we're Megala, a from higher than Ishtalshus. B'meila, the kings become our craftsmen. We are Goizer. We decree on those who originally were menagid. They originally rebelled against Yiddishkeit and spreading of Jewish people. They eventually become the greatest asset and the greatest help for Jewish people and for Judaism. To the extent you can transform and elevate from dark into light and from bitter into sweetness. Like a translated in the story of Achashverosh quite literally, that Haman and Russia, the greatest Russia, ended up being the one to increase the glory of the Eibishter, the glory of Mordechai in the greatest way. Right? What does he say? He says, this shall be done to the man that the king wishes to honor. Who's the king? So you have the literal king, and then you have the Eibishter, the person who the Eibishter wishes to honor, and even Achashverosh recognizes and honors, Mordechai honors the Yidden. Came to Yalanu to the extent that it translates the fact that Jewish people have light and joy and celebration. Like it's translated in the Gemara, Oira means that we have Torah, but Torah Gufa Oira Lashon Nekev Dekal Torah Balpeh Torah Pirush Menu Yetzer Oira Chol Kuloi. When we say Oira, light in female term, it refers to Torah Shabbat, which is the recipient, Torah B'Pirusha, the commentary of Torah, that literally illuminates the whole world. When we say Simcha, joy, we mean Yom Tif, Sasein, we mean Milah, we mean Bris Milah, the circumcision, Vikari, the tefillin, the preciousness, that's the tefillin, Duksha Kol Torah Kol the tefillin, the entire Torah is compared to tefillin, Yeshleim Rekilgam tefillin, Bari Alman, Ksibu Mikam Chisog Echad Baretz. When we say that we merit the tefillin, we also mean the Eibish's tefillin, which we know what it says in Hashem's tefillin, the greatness of the Jewish people, who is like my nation, Am Chisrael, Dahainu Shenika Begil Amal Dison, Nashaz Melech. What happens? We are Zeichat tefillin, the Eibish's tefillin is the mile of a Yid. When the Eibish reveals the mile of a Yid, all of a sudden in our world, we can see, and everyone can see, the superiority and the greatness of a Jew, which is the idea of Nadar Shas Melech, we explain at length. The Mile of a Yid in a time of Golus, when we're in the essence, is revealed through the Keichas Pnimim. The Rebbe concludes, Maamar, Isches, it's a bracha, like it was normal in the later years, Tafshin Mem Daled. And like the Gemara says, we bring close one gula to another gula. Therefore, Purim happens in the second Adar, where it's near Pesach. From this Geula, where the Jewish people, even in Galus, already start experiencing the light and the joy. When we're still in the last moments of Galus, this will bring us very closely and very hastily, quickly to the ultimate Geula. The kings who will be our craftsmen, and this is the pasuk the Rebbe already quoted earlier about Achashverosh being a servant for Mordechai. They will bring the Jewish people the gifts in the pure vessels to the Holy Land, the land where the Eibish's eyes are constantly upon from beginning of the year to end of the year. The Sham Guf Yerushalayim Kodesh, Keres Malach Rav, Dav Malchim Shicha there itself in Yerushalayim, the Sham Guf Bahar Kodesh there itself in Harabayis, the Beis Hamikdash Eibishah will build. Zrizus will be in the greatest, swiftest, hastened, right, the quickest. To the extent it's going to be so quick, higher than any limitation, in a way of completely higher than any knowledge, higher than rationale. Like we said, the idea of the essence, it's higher than Ishtalshus. We dance into the Geula with the greatest joy that's higher than any limitation. The ultimate redemption may be speedily. There's all Jewish people from all the different generations, and among them, and in their head, leading is the Rebbe, the Nasi, Mordechai, Yehudi Vester Malka, together with Mordechai and Esther. Kula Migala Magolas are all going to be redeemed from redemption, from exile. Shleimus Hagula, B'Yachadim Shleimus Am, Shleimus Torah. We're going to have a complete redemption together with the completion of Torah and the completion of the nation, Shleimus Arts and the complete land of Eretz Yisrael. But if in the Yachav to the extent that Adrab and Eibishah will actually expand the borders of Eretz Yisrael, Gam Eretz, Keni, Kenin, Kanmoni, the three new lands are going to be conquered. And obviously the literal meaning will never be changed. Adarab, Pshat will become the primary thing, the Maisa Ha'ikr, Vayisoid, Shokol Seder Shasha, Nisav Alik, Bershaido, Vavai Nisav Olav. Pshat becomes the Yisoid, the essence that the whole Seder Shasha stands upon, like the famous Pirush in Vini Hashem Nisav Olav, the Abish is dependent on a Yid's Avoid, on a Yid's Dalamato, Bepashtus, and we mean literally, Shabikarev Mamish Tegul Mitzvah Shlema, very speedily should be the Gula, Kol Yisrael, Meshachal Darius, from old Jewish people, from old generations, Shams Gufim, souls and bodies, and Shechas Kenim, Behavim in a Mamish, may be speeding our time. Beautiful. So to sum up, what the Rebbe says in our Maamar is, again, the Maril says that the Teikvishal Nes and the Ikra of the Nes, and the Gemara says that the strength of a miracle is the time of Nadr HaMelech, when the king's sleep drifted away. And our question was, what does that mean? Why would that be the greatest part of the miracle? Seemingly it's not really relevant to the miracle. We don't really see how that begins the redemption. And the Rebbe explains in the Maamar that when we say Nadr Shas Makshal, we're talking about the Eibush sleep drifting away. Why is the Eibush sleeping? Because the time of Golus. In the time of Golus, Jewish people are not behaving, Jewish people are not alert, and therefore the Eibush is not alert, and the Eibush is not taking care of us. What happens when you sleep? The Rebbe went in at Barichas to explain a dream where there's no organization. Therefore, you don't see the Mile of a Yid. When in that time of Golus, when everything goes up to the source, B'meila, the Yidins, right? Only down here you don't see the Mile of a Yid, but in the source, the Yidin's Mile is in the greatest way. When the king's sleep goes away, and therefore that Maila, that greatness of the Jewish people, the way it's in its source, is revealed with Pnimius, that is the greatest Gula, and the way that's inspired is when a Yid takes his essence, his source, and brings it into his koiches through living with his nefesh every day of the year, every different season of the year. That's how we cause the Eibush to awaken, and from that it'll come to the Eibush being revealed. And even in our goals today, the Goyim will recognize that we're the greatest, and Yidden are higher, and it's going to come down to time and space. So, with the ultimate redemption, each have a wonderful day. Chaim.